1 Timothy 1 verse 5. Now the end of the commandment is charity. As previously mentioned, the Marvel series of movies has been fascinating. At this point, it is challenging to create new legends because everyone's expectations have increased. Without previous works, the current productions would still be worthy of applause. From a personal perspective, Casey Treat's initial 5 or 6 years of sharing were quite good. Still, the following years were not as impressive. After all, everyone has their own problems, and he becomes more focused on personal gain. However, he does not compromise his character and beliefs. Indeed, he believes that this is progress because more people are becoming aware of him. Unfortunately, he has lost his direction. Just think, in the first 5 years of building his church, the congregation had reached 8,000 people. However, as his preaching quality declined over the next 10 years, it decreased to just over 1,000 people. Hence, he tried even harder, so his preaching became poor. When the church had 8,000 members and was still growing, his efforts actually caused the church to decline to just over 1,000 people. Isn't that alarming? To him, this was a form of progress. Of course, when he started to deteriorate in the 6th year, he wasn't aware of it. At the same time, he didn't know what the future would hold. But for the sake of fame and fortune, he gave up. He mistakenly believed that more people would be drawn to him by making more people aware of him and becoming more famous. However, what was the situation like after 10 years? His church was not as large as Zion Church and carried a lot of debt. I used to admire him. When I visited his church for observation, it happened to be in its 5th year of establishment. The scale was enormous, like a giant supermarket. It amazed me. It turns out that when a person adds God to their life, remarkable achievements can be accomplished in just 5 years. Previously, he was just an addict, but by repenting and believing in the Lord, he was able to achieve such great things in such a short time. Looking back now, the year I visited him turned out to be the pinnacle of his life. In fact, the same can be said for other churches I have visited. During that year, Casey Treat reached the peak of his life, and then he continuously went downhill. At that time, we didn't know how things would turn out in the future. All I knew was that if I continued, would give my utmost energy and time to work hard. After several decades, when I examine the fruits and compare them to the group of spiritual elders, leaders, and pioneers I once looked up to, I realize that their outcomes are all regrettable. Indeed, I have experienced these decisions as well. And even though my decisions were more difficult to make, they had more vitality. My entire faith is alive and vibrant, while theirs is not. They gradually become stagnant and rigid and return to worldly practices. Why was I able to find this? Is there a specific method? No. It's simply because I have always focused on character. That's why I chose this unconventional approach. Even explaining it would take a long time, and even 10 or 20 years ago, I couldn't dissect it for you in detail. Because I focus on character, I have my own process of measurement. I understand that specific steps in character must be taken to lead to particular things happening. Of course, sometimes, when you take a step, miracles happen, and I am happy to encounter them. But sometimes, achieving fame and fortune with just one step brings about a downfall in character, and I wouldn't choose that. The most profound experience in the past was the split with the former Mother Church in Canada. I couldn't explain it in detail back then because of this step. I realized that to agree with him, I would have to abandon my faith and become a corrupted worker. Only then would I accept this matter. Why? Because even my father wouldn't do such a thing. Even though he didn't believe in the Lord back then, his choices were more correct than Gideon's. That's how I know for sure that Gideon must be wrong. I deeply understand the struggles and sacrifices he went through to accept this. If my faith cannot surpass my father's when he didn't believe, how can I call myself a believer? I wouldn't have gone to the Truth Church, let alone establish a church. Why should I let myself fall so low? Not only do I have to abandon my faith and go against years of conviction, but I also have to lower myself to my father's level when he worked as a laborer. Even though Gideon has shown grace to me, I cannot do the same. After all, God's character is of utmost importance. That's why I couldn't explain it to you at that time. How could I tell you that through inference? I knew what internal struggles he went through to make this decision. It was just speculation. However, I have also experienced God over the years and received his approval through this inference. From the moment we believe in the Lord, we must protect our character godly. That is the right path of faith. Regardless of which era we find ourselves in, it is difficult to explain all these complex reasons in detail. Even the disputes among the charismatic movement are complex, and it is difficult to judge right from wrong. However, why can I often point out their problems early on and always make my judgments accurate? It's because a person's character will guide them to further deterioration in a specific matter. Ultimately, a false character will only lead to a web of lies. Over the years, I have provided many suggestions and teachings based on this understanding. However, many people have doubts, and even non-believers struggle with this deadlock. People don't understand why, if there is a God in the world, he would allow this person to fall. This question perfectly explains a concept. Think about it, if a God exists in the world, why would he choose Saul? God knew very well that he would fall. If a God exists in the world, why would he choose David? God foresaw that he would be judged. If a God exists in the world, why would he anoint Samson? He would eventually be blinded and share the same fate as his enemies. These people fail to understand because they do not know the value of character. God is not blessing the person, but instead blessing the person's goodness, which is the secret I have shared, to love neighbors as oneself. These people possessed goodness at that time, but unfortunately, they lost it later. From God's perspective, why would he not bless them when they possessed it? What would happen later is another matter. Do you know how precious it is to possess goodness? It is even more rare to have it in one's youth. God indeed blessed them. God is not incapable of foreseeing. Even with foreknowledge, God would still bless them because goodness is that important. Therefore, you can understand why God blesses me and leads our church. You also understand the importance of the goodness we strive to uphold because it sets Zion Church apart from others. 1 Timothy 1 verse 5. Now the end of the commandment is charity.
God's goodness surely follows you and me. When I'm marching on, all my doubts will be cast off to see. Miracles come running to me. I must look beyond, far beyond what my eyes can see. God's goodness surely follows you and me. When I'm marching on, all my doubts will be cast off to see. Miracles come running to me. When I'm marching on, all my doubts will be cast off to see. Miracles